Why would God care to see you love your life? Why would God care to see you live a good or bad life? Why would God want to see you suffering even though you're going to go through suffering regardless? I mean, why would God care if you are suffering? And if you are suffering, what are you going to do about it? Because people think as if it's God's fault because they're suffering in their thoughts, or they're suffering in choices, they're suffering in opportunities, relationships, partnerships, doesn't matter. People will blame a label for what they're going through. And then when they're going through that one thing, somebody can tell them like, hey, you may disappoint God if you go against what I'm telling you. So you will accept abuse and injustice because you don't want to disappoint God. How can you disappoint God or make God mad? Or how can God have an emotion when you don't know God's emotions? Not only just that, what is an emotion to God when God is not emotional? That doesn't make sense. Like, you transcend emotional states of being. That's how intelligent you are, because when you're emotionally intelligent, you become peaceful with yourself. So if you're at peace, why would you want to step into somebody who's learning to go through the lessons that they designed for themselves? I mean, the trees feel what I'm saying, because think about it. You can only be in suffering when you're putting yourself through what you want to hurt you. So you'll call it pain for sure. And a lot of times people will get piercings, tattoos. People will go through all these different implications to think as if this is considered healing because it hurts so good. That's why a lot of times people, especially women they enjoy dick that does things to their mind, and even if it feels good to them, they enjoy what comes with it. A lot of times they don't care to get away from that because they enjoy what's in that man's pants. And that's the thing right there. You're going through suffering, and same for guys as well. If she has, you know what I'm saying, she got that soaker on her, she got that waterfall, that water park, you're gonna enjoy what comes with it because she's letting you go inside of it. And if that vibration feels good every time you go inside of it, or it feels different, you're not going to want to get away from that. You may do things to piss her off or whatever, but you're going to enjoy that suffering and pain as well that she's putting you through because you allowed yourself to go through that. But you can't blame God for what you told yourself that you were going through before you were even born. And that's the thing right there. The suffering that we want to find pain, and that's the thing. People want to find themselves going through suffering. You can never suffer. And the thing is too, God wants to watch you suffer and watch you go through pain. So you cannot sit here and ask, why would this label allow? No, you allow yourself to go through that. And then you'll probably ask, well, how? It's because you tell yourself, if I don't go away from this person or get away from this person, I may end up dead. I may be brutally beat down to where I can't even walk or function straight. You have all these different reasonings in your minds where you just sit there and you allow yourself to constantly go through that nightmare. And that's a choice. You can get upset all you want. It's just like slavery, school, jobs. I mean, these are choices that people make, and who can you blame for making that choice? Your mom and yourself as well, because you didn't have to go, but if you don't go, what happens to you? Okay, now if something happens to you, what happens to your parents? So now you make a choice into going to these school systems to teach you some things that you can learn on your own. But people don't understand that, so they leave the school system and go right back into it and realize how it's all a scam, but learning is scamming itself anyways, because how can learning anything in this world learn itself when what you're learning has already been learned by your spirit, and your spirit didn't have to learn anything because it knew everything before a language was learning itself. And the thing is too, for the key points, because for a solution, for you to get away from the vibration of suffering and pain, because these are attractions that you have to put yourself into, because once you are unified with lower vibrations, you're not in divine oneness. So you're becoming a fraction of yourself, a small percentage of yourself, to where you're not being completely purified and your completion for your data to corrupt the virus in the mind that isn't thinking correctly. And once you rewire your mind, you're not able to understand that you put the virus in your head to make you think as if what you were going to be doing for your future was supposed to be done today by going against a label that you think is allowing you to go through these things. No, you are allowing yourself to go through that. And that's why you're mad at yourself and not God. That's exactly why when you drop the label, you can now see this force being life and creation and not a separate deity. That's the thing right there. It's not a separate being. Because understand, you got to see this life force as your energy and your creation. Because remember, drop that title. It's not the title's fault. Because remember, you're at fault for believing that it's God's fault. And God's not even here. Because for one, if there was a God, why is there children starving? Why are people, going through poor instances in life? Why are people suffering? Why do people go through these different trials in life that they want to commit suicide in? When there's a God, if there was, nobody would go through anything. But that's the contradiction or the oxymoron for the label. So when you drop the label, there is no God because you're being it. You're being in duality. The next one, you have to be responsible for yourself. So literally take responsibility and then alchemize it and be confident in it and don't run away from that. Recognize that you are a co-creator of your experiences. By you being the co-creator, you're not God, but you're the co-creation of what God's mindset would be physically. So because you have this co-creation of what you're being, you're basically player 2 in God's mind. God's always going to be player 1. But you're also player 1 when this deity passes a controller over, even though you're still playing as player 2. So player 2 is still going, but all you're doing is holding a controller to player 1 and you're learning how to be player 1. But you have to be able to experience that by being at a heightened experience for you to learn about. But that requires you to understand that your choices that you're making, you made this life up to what you have to go through because you have to learn through that growth. New opportunities arise when you put yourself through suffering and pain because you can learn from the lesson that hurt the most. And the lesson that hurt the most is what you grew up in. And when you grow up in pain by going through it so much, you get to see who you're becoming and who you can formulate. Who you can or what you can formulate your opinions to grow up in. So growth has no choice but to attract itself into your life because have you seen what you become when you went through what you went through, even though what you went through was just a memory that you seen yourself going through and cringe about as you're in this age today? The third one, you have to always act consciously. When you're acting consciously, so instead of thinking that you're going to have a savior like Jesus Christ or Satan or God or whatever, you got to be able to understand that for one, your awareness and your choices will get you away from suffering. Always remember that. Your awareness and your choices will get you away from suffering. It will reduce that. Not saying that it'll deplete it entirely, but you can now understand that when you're about to go through that, it's like, okay. How can I react to that? Because that's what the test is, your reaction timing. So when it happens, what are you about to do? Who are you about to become? And how will you manipulate your mind into what you're witnessing? Because what you're witnessing is happening, but do not just sit there and act on nothing. No, you need to act on something and know that what you're doing, if you know intuitively it feels right and it feels like it'll keep you safe and in control of your life, then you have to act on it. Because if you don't, you may end up dead, you may end up being abused, neglected, you may be hurt, you may go through things to where you may even just act as if you were just never existing in the first place. And you may be in a whole depression, a psych ward, and you don't want to go through that. So by avoiding it, how can you act consciously every single day? By acting off the first instinct that you can get your hands on. So if you see a wrench or a hammer and somebody's assaulting you or whatever and it's right next to you, bing, nigga, bash their head in self-defense because you're defending yourself. But just sitting there allowing them to hurt you or do whatever to you, that's going to put a stain on your spirit if you do not heal it. And it'll be there forever to where it hurts to even heal. It's like peeling a Band-Aid off and you have hair under the Band-Aid. So it's like, no, I'm going to keep it on there. It's just too much. It keeps hurting, but why don't you just rip it off? But people aren't there yet. They're not ready to rip off the Band-Aid because they don't want to see what's underneath. That's why it's growing. And it's growing because you're putting growth into what you form labels in. That's why when you act consciously, labels are not the fault for your sufferings. You're the one suffering because that's what you put yourself into, because it's what you lie in every day. When you're going through suffering and you lie in it and you cry every night, what do you keep doing? Eventually, you'll have to stop crying every night, but then it'll feel good to cry every night because think about what you've healed and who you have remembered to be. The fourth one, focus on your flow and stop blaming on things that don't matter. Remember, you had to see your challenges like your signals and not as if you're being punished. So when you're going through a challenge, your DNA, your cellular signaling is going to help you transcend what you have to go through. Because those challenges are telling you, hey, you remember when we first met in a dimension that had no form. You told yourself, I'm going to go through this challenge, this situation, and this life, and I'm going to overcome it. And your future self is looking at you in the moment before you descend, you looking at yourself as if, oh, okay, we're going to find out. I already know what you're going to do. And you like, watch me do it. But then once you get into that situation, you don't know what to do. That's the test right there. It's a challenge, but the signaling is basically you remembering what you have to go through and what you are witnessing. It's not a detriment, it's not a harm, but you're harming yourself to harness energies that are harvesting your way of seeing yourself again. When they see who you're being, they have to get you to blame God for what they were doing to themselves. And it's not your fault, but it's your fault if you don't do the healing. If you keep on making an excuse and not working through the blame, then you'll always blame a label. You'll always blame God. You always blame your mom. You always blame your dad. You always blame your brother, your sister, your ex. You always blame somebody for what you could have changed. You decide to sit there. You decide to hang out with them. That's on you. That's your fault. But once you work through that, once you heal that, now you're becoming better. You're becoming more optimistic for different things that are coming into your life, to where you don't feel uncomfortable doing certain things because that's what feels good to you, because you remember where you are going in life. The last one, you have to always implement and integrate polarity, aka duality, into your life. You have to always be aware, not accept. Because if you accept God, you're accepting Satan. If you accept Satan, you're accepting Lucifer. But what's the difference? They're all just labels for good and bad energies. Either way it goes, doesn't matter how heightened one is or how descended the other is. They're both the same being. When you understand that, you can understand and understand that pain and growth are a part of the system that you would consider to be good and evil. And there is no good and evil. So if there's no good and evil, there can't be a God and Satan. That's exactly why, on the first part, if you missed that first part, drop the labels. There is no good and bad. It's just a system that you're not used to seeing before. Because remember, we come from a realm to where there is no good and bad. All you're doing is just observing good and bad. Remember, there is no realm. Because I know somebody's like, what does that look like? Where's the look for that? Because I've never seen that before. That's the thing. You can't look for it. You have to sit with it. When you're observing observations, good and bad cannot exist with themselves anymore, because they don't know what they want to see for today. So when you are putting yourself into the system that you have structured and you cause chaos in, you reorder that chaos into forming it into what you see yourself becoming observable in. Because once you observe what you want to be in, you tell yourself, no matter what good and bad does to me, I will not get upset, because good and bad have done these things that I watched a system do upon itself. That's really all it is. You're watching the system harm itself for the good of society. That's why things and the shits that we're going through, there shouldn't be a good or bad thought of what's happening in society. It's basically what people are watching. Are movies good and bad? You may have a good or bad review, but that's the thing though. You can't have a good or bad review on your life. But when you review your life, would you consider it to be a good life lived or a bad life that you want to live again? That's up to you, because when it's all said and done, you can't blame God for the destination that you want to put yourself into. And the thing is, to get into that higher realm, you have to be in that dimension right now, because interdimensional existences are happening in your mind. Because you can't walk through a door and go see a good dimension to just sit with. No, to be there, you have to tell yourself, I'm basically where I want to live in. And if you want to live in higher duality by being in unity, you got to understand that, for one, that's not logical, because there always are going to be good and bad instances. But when you're finding peace, you'll be able to resonate in realms that don't require labels. So when you get away from labels, what is good and bad to what you can't label yourself into being? Because you're not a human. You're not your name. You're not your age. You're not in your state. You're not in your country. You're not driving whatever you have. You're not going to school. You're not even going to work. How are you working on yourself? By teaching yourself the things that you already knew. And once you know what God is, how can God harm you or put you or throw you in a firmament or a hell toy box or this fiery abyss of damnation because you didn't do the things that were lying to themselves. Imagine this label throwing you in a label because you didn't follow labels. That's literally all religious gurus do, or people who think as if heaven and hell exists. People think as if you don't do one thing, then God will throw you in hell for this or that, or Jesus will do this or that because you didn't accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. Imagine accepting a label to come and save you, and if you don't accept that label to come save you, then you're going to get thrown into a label that won't save you. But if you don't label life, what are you in? And if you don't know that God is not what you think it is, then what does God think it is? And if you don't know what God is, how can you know what God is if you're not being it now? Because when you're being it now, what does that identity become? What is it being every day? How does it vibrate? What does it do? How does it work? How does it live? There is no label for that. You just watch it work. You watch it live. You watch it play. Because remember, who's playing on your life if you're the player playing in a life that you have designed for yourself to act consciously in? So when you're suffering and going through pain, understand you brought that upon yourself. So how can you work around it and fix it for you to become more loving in the process of the growth that you want to become more divine in? Celestial rising, divine noon, and grand night to the beautiful divine mirage watching this mindful message. It's your divine reflection, divine messenger, and we are back with another message to understand. If you enjoy these videos and you appreciate what's going on in your life, if you made it this far, tell yourself, man, it feels good to be me. Because who am I? Comment down below if you made it this far. Man, it feels good to be me because who am I? Have a great and divine day, divine reflection.